Rosemary Gill is the Director of Education at Milk Street Cooking School, an educator dedicated to helping people create lasting home cooking habits. She oversees the development of cooking classes for the general public as well as Milk Street's community initiatives. Previously, her work was with nonprofit organizations engaged in improving food security through educational means. She has leadership and teaching experience, having served in executive, managerial, and educational roles for various organizations, including America's Test Kitchen, 18 Reasons, Medford Farms Market, the Somerville Arts Council, Spur, Garden for the Environment, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Francisco, and more. Welcome, Rosie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show.
This is super fun. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Same. I really enjoyed getting to know you in Boston.
Well, we had a blast in Boston. So, to explain to listeners what this is all about, Red Stick Spice in Baton Rouge is now a Milk Street certified partner location to teach cooking classes. And
Yes, you are.
yeah, and I went to Boston and trained under you guys and met lots of other small gourmet store retailers around the country who are doing the same thing I am. And my brain was just like exploding when I left. And so I have to tell this story. So you guys do a really cool chickpea demonstration that speaks to how to bloom spices. And I was just like, and we talk about this in my shop all the time with customers. How do I use spices? And I was like, this is it. We've discovered how we explain it. And we had an early flight the next morning. We get back to Baton Rouge. It's midday, and I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm making the chickpeas. And I lost every bit of culinary knowledge I'd ever known, and I coated those chickpeas in baking soda.
Oh no.
And as soon as I did it, I
Oh no.
said, Anne, this is not correct. Rosie did not use baking soda, and it foamed, and it was super weird. So just so everyone understands, you coat the chickpeas in cornstarch,
Cornstarch.
not baking soda. But
Right.
that was so exciting to me, and I can't tell you how many times I've done that exercise in the store just since we've been back from Boston. And
Okay.
it's like light bulb moment, split
Yes.
split the atom. It's like the coolest thing. So I want to talk more about that in a minute, but
Right.
like I said, we are now a partner location for Milk Street Cooking Schools, and you guys talked a lot about the Milk Street Way. Can you describe what the Milk Street Way is?
Sure. Um, there are two ways we talk about it in the cooking school. So the Milk Street Way, in terms of recipes or cooking, is looking for simplicity, boldness, and contrast. So our recipes have a promise that they actually won't be technically difficult. And through really simple light bulb moments like the chickpeas, which we'll explain later for your listeners, um, you can transform very familiar ingredients and dishes. So we don't want people laboring over the stove for hours. We don't want people confused. We want people to maybe jump off one bridge with us with a new ingredient or a new flavor profile, but not have to jump off three bridges. So they feel like they're empowered. And we do that by having simple recipes that have really bold flavor and that feature a lot of contrast. The other way we think about it at the milking school, at the teaching school, at the cooking school, sorry, is our teaching philosophy. So the Milk Street Way for our teaching philosophy, which I think is important for your listeners to know now that you are a licensed venue for our classes, is that our classes will be experiential and learner focused, meaning that we really put the learner first when we're developing our lesson plans, and not any objectives or goals that I may have as a teacher. But if I put myself in my students' shoes, how do I how do I remove all the noise from a lesson plan so that they get access to the fundamental learning objectives of the class in a clear and concise way, and in a way that's fun, because fun is the absolute best strategy for learning. If you have a good time, you're more likely to come back, you're more likely to keep cooking.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I talk to my employees all the time. Um, we don't like it when a dish doesn't turn out great, but as long as we make it a teachable moment and their brain is exploding when they leave, we can like get through those moments in the event that something doesn't go quite right.
You're kinder than I am. I think I told this to you guys too. I say to my students all the time, I actually don't care if you like our food. I care that you understand why our food tastes the way it does. So I'm trying to teach people how to cook food they love, and they may not love a certain recipe. So you're kinder than I am. I'm trying to teach people critical cooking skills, and maybe I need to take a lesson from your book of you know politeness.
Well, that leads me to asking about recipes because we are, written recipes are a big, big part of our cooking classes. And customers are constantly emailing me with the mistakes I've made in recipes or, why is this worded this way? And
Yeah.
I read once, I don't know if it was Michael Pollan or Michael Bittman. I believe it was one of the two who said, at their core, recipes are not great teachers. Speak to that a little bit because I know in some of the curriculums I've gotten, there isn't always a recipe, a written recipe or
Mhm.
formula involved.
So first, I would say is that I've been running cooking schools for a decade, and I've taught thousands of classes at this point. And there are some people that are recipe followers, and there's some people that are not, and there's every color and variation in between. And there's no right or wrong way. So if you're a recipe follower, great, be a recipe follower. If you're an improv cook, that's awesome. I think what's most important for a cooking school is to teach students why cooking works so that whether they're cooking improv and therefore if you're an improv cook you'll understand why you're making certain choices as you move about the kitchen, and if you're a recipe follower you'll understand why the recipe writer is asking you to do certain things. That way you're the one in control and you're in the driver's seat. And I think a lot of vulnerability I see in students is that they don't understand the why behind the recipe, so they're doing things sort of blindly and they hope it works. So that's one thing I have to say about recipes is that there's no right or wrong about whether you like them or not. It's just who you are as a cook, and that's fine. It is really important that a recipe is written well because for us, and I think for any company worth its salt, it is your best advocate. It is it is proof of your concept. It is your marketing. If your recipes work and they work well, if people follow them, um, then people know whether they trust you or not, and if your food is the type of food that they want to continue to make. So making sure that a recipe is written correctly, that it is clear, that the commas are in the right place so that people know if it's 2 cups walnuts chopped or 2 cups of chopped walnuts. I guess that's not commas, that's word ordering, is really important. But I do agree that they're not great teachers because a good recipe is also not super wordy and it's not going to tell you why you're doing certain things. I have written recipes that way for classes, but they won't make it through the editorial process for a cookbook. So they are not great teachers, but they can be great guides. A great teacher helps you understand what that guide is telling you to do and why.
I love that. And that's, you know, I don't get super upset or even feisty when they find my mistakes because it's it's all about and honestly what you said a second ago about trust. They trust me enough to come back to me and ask me to clarify.
Yeah. Oh, and we all make mistakes. I mean, I tell my students that, I tell my teachers that all the time. I It is fine if you make a mistake. We're all human. We make mistakes. What I think is, and it's fine if you don't know everything. What's important is that you know how to respond to it. So I completely agree with you. That comma is gonna go in the wrong place. It doesn't matter. What matters is all the emotion you're putting into your community, and that your students trust you. And then they're going to feel confident to be able to come to you and say, "Can you help me? I don't understand this. It may be an error."
Exactly. Okay, so speaking of trust, you've entrusted me and several other gourmet stores around the country to be Milk Street partner locations.
Sure.
First of all, talk about when did you all decide that you wanted other folks to teach the Milk Street way? How did that program come about?
Um, From the beginning, we knew that we wanted to have a national platform for the cooking school because everything else Milk Street does has a national, if not a global platform. And we didn't want the cooking school to be only accessible to our Boston audience or for our audience that travels to Boston. Um, we're also young. We tomorrow we celebrate our third anniversary.
Happy
So
anniversary.
thanks. There's only, it takes a while to find your rhythm in any new business, and I know cooking school, so it takes a while for us to find our rhythm, and you don't want to put the cart before the horse and open 20 cooking schools and staff 20 cooking schools with 20 different audiences at the same time. So we knew we had this goal, and then when we got introduced to the gourmet catalog, the opportunity was just too good to turn up, as we were able to support independent small businesses like yours and increase access to our classes by partnering with Gourmet Catalog. And it allows us to do it in a way that makes us nimble and still be more flexible. And I don't actually think we have goals now at all to open other Milk Street cooking schools because we have all of these wonderful partners, such as yourself, like 22 locations around the country and hopefully more soon, um, that are doing a fabulous job representing us and can do it in a way that makes sense for their demographic. It takes so much time to get to know a community. You know your community. You know how to now take a Milk Street recipe, take our teaching philosophy, and make it work for your community. And that's knowledge that would take us years and years and years to learn if we tried to do that by building our own brick and mortars.
So for me, as a cooking instructor, to have certified with you all, and I'm saying this to other gourmet stores around the country, it is a
Mm-hmm.
dream come true for me to
Oh,
receive from you full curriculums
oh
and
wow.
and written plans. And I taught on Tuesday night, I taught Not My Mother's Chicken.
Oh, good.
And yeah, and it was sensational, a complete smash. And what was interesting to me was what the front runner recipe was, because it was the recipe when my staff and I were preparing and going through. We always have a recipe in a cooking class where we say that's going to be a tough sell.
Yeah.
And the one we thought was the tough sell was the winner of the night,
Which
the
one?
the Somali chicken soup.
That soup is so good.
It's mind blowing.
It is mind blowing. It's
Yeah.
it's quintessential Milk Street. So it was actually one of the first recipes we developed, and it was developed in partner with one of our first cooking teachers, Nimo Mahmoud Hassan, who's in maybe the best cook I've ever met in my entire life, and she lives here in Boston. And why it's quintessential Milk Street is it sort of throws a lot of conventional Western knowledge about cooking out the door and simplifies things. So you don't brown anything. You throw raw chicken in a pot with some onions and a few spices, and you make this very mild base. And then from there, it's all about texture and contrast and flavor, but it's customizable. I love it. So you get raw vegetables. You don't cook carrots until they're soft, or cook potatoes until they're soft, or have soft egg noodles. You have this wonderful, mild, gentle broth, and then you've got crunchy arugula and fresh scallions and peppery radishes, and then those two sauces. One is like blow the top of your head off spicy, and the other one's just got all this incredible warmth from spices, but it's not spicy. And so you get this depth of flavor, but it's still really fresh and bright. Um, and people can make it warm, hotter, or crunchier, or spicier to their like. So I mean, really is the simplest process to this transformative idea of what chicken soup can be. And Chris wanted me to base an entire class just on that soup. When she made it for him at Milk Street, he said, "Well, we're done. That's the best thing we've ever made at Milk Street."
I love that. And that soup finally helped me address when customers come in, they say, I don't I don't they look at the recipe and they say, "Oh
Mm.
no, I don't like spicy food." And we try to explain to them that is we're talking about spicy that can be super flavorful and complex, but not necessarily
Oh,
hot.
right. Spicy versus spiced are really different things. And spice and they can overlap, but spiced is maybe one of the most important techniques or characteristics of great food. Spicy is often up to personal preference.
So we usually get the question, what we always get the question, how do I use spices? And, for the 7 years I've owned the store, I've tried to figure out what am I doing wrong in not answering this question. I have to say, no one walked away from that class asking, how do I use spices? But I'm curious how you would answer that if a customer said, hey, Rosie, how do I use spices?
Sure. Well, I think what people are really asking is how do I approach something that's unfamiliar? And so I try when people ask a question is to ask a few other questions to find out maybe what the underlying impetus for the question is. So I really think what someone's saying is, I am interested, but I don't know how to start. Um, so what I try, I think when someone, I think the best way, the easiest way to get to start is just to teach someone how to make a very simple spiced oil, which doesn't have to be spicy. Again, it's fry some cumin seeds in some oil and just and show them how you can just drizzle that on top of some roasted potatoes, and right away it smells wonderful. It tastes wonderful. Your kitchen has a whole new aroma, and it's one spice. I think a lot of people think spices means this very complicated sort of alchemy of 1,000 bottles and powders. Um, and I think if you start really simple, you choose one really good spice, and just show them what it can do to something they're very familiar with. Just drizzle a, you know, cumin infused butter on top of mashed potatoes, and people will feel really differently about their mashed potatoes. So you just need to start slow, find out why people are really asking, get them hooked on one technique, and then you can say, all right, well, let's try two spices. Let's try three. Um, so I think when people that I mean that's an approach I take all the time in the cooking school is just don't give them too much information, give them one technique, see how they respond, and then get increasingly more complicated as you realize and get to know them better. That's one of the joys of teaching is that it's not a recipe. There's a person in front of me. I can read their reaction. I can see if they like something or they don't, if they understand, if they don't.
So I'm teaching 60-minute Spice Master on
Oh, good.
Monday. Okay, well, first of all, I put it up on our website and I made a mistake, and people kept it was selling like crazy, and people were emailing me saying, I cannot wait to see how you do this. And I thought, what? What are they talking about? And I realized I had written 60-second Spice Master.
Oh, 60 second.
So I was like, okay, well, we're
I'm
good,
not
but we're
that
maybe not that good. So it is everybody. It's 60-minute Spice Master. So I'm excited to see how the exercise with the lentil soup goes as we layer one step as it goes along with layering the flavors on that
good.
lentil
Exactly.
soup. Um, but that's where that chickpea exercise is going to come in. So take our listeners through the thinking behind the blooming spices for the
Sure.
chickpeas.
So there are two ways to change the flavor, two main ways to change the flavor of spices. Let me retract that. There are three main ways. There are two that involve cooking and one that does not. So you have whole
Okay.
spices. You change their flavor when you grind them. So mechanically, you can change their flavor because you um, increase surface area, release more, break cell walls. All the reasons that a grated carrot tastes different than a whole carrot, sweeter and whatnot, happens with mechanical when you grind versus whole. But the two main cooking ways that people think of when they're working with spices is you can toast spices, which is dry heat, or you can bloom spices, which is when spices come into contact with fat, because there are a lot of fat soluble flavor compounds in spices, meaning they will only be apparent to you if they come into contact with fat and are quote unquote released. You can do that very slowly overnight. You could steep bay leaves and cardamom seeds in cream and then make a wonderfully lightly aromatic whipped cream. But the fast way to do it is to bloom in hot fat because heat catalyzes or speeds up the chemical reactions. So with the chickpeas, what happens is you coat them in cornstarch, not baking soda, and they're well dried,
Correct.
and then you coat them in cornstarch, and that just helps to dry them. It also helps with the browning process. And then you fry the chickpeas in oil. It's not really, I mean, it's not a ton of oil. It's not like you're deep frying them. You're shallow frying them, sauteing them in a very hot pan. And just like with a steak, you don't move them because you want to create browning. They're crispy chickpeas and you want to get this depth of flavor. And then you turn the heat off and you add in ground spices and salt at that point. And the reason you do it at the end is that ground spices burn really quickly. They have all the surface area because you've ground them up. And if you were to leave them in the pan undisturbed with the chickpeas, you would burn them. So the residual heat of the chickpeas that have been browned in the oil blooms the spices, brings out all the flavors, but protects them from burning. So you have this immensely aromatic, crispy, salty, little bit sweet, spiced chickpea that is absolutely addictive. And how we run it in class is we challenge people to build their own spice blend. And then we do a little comparison and everyone can taste everyone else's creations. We have yet to meet a student who makes a dud of a spice blend. I mean, I really reassure students that you're not going to fail. These are delicious and they become the best topping for butternut squash soup. They're a great appetizer when people come over for an evening meal. I serve them with a glass of rosé. They're great in a salad. So they're just this phenomenal trick up your sleeve as a home cook.
It was so much fun doing that exercise, and my mixture, the other classmates described mine as, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I was definitely, like,
Yeah,
feeling the pumpkin spice vibe then, but, your co-instructor that night said that in one class, someone used, like, a ton of
right.
cardamom, and she thought, "Oh gosh, what's gonna happen here?" And she was like, they were wonderful. They were
Well, I think
delicious."
what happens is we do help people. So we give them a structure with their spice blend. So spices come, you can group them in categories. And what we say is, they're just a handful of rules for making the spice blend for this exercise. And that is, it has to be more than one spice because one does not a blend make. So a minimum of two spices. We don't let people use more than three because then for 60-minute spice master becomes 6 day spice master. And then we've grouped the spices. We put them out on trays in different sort of flavor profiles. So there's the warming sweet spices like cinnamon and allspice. And then there are the pungent spices like turmeric or cumin. There's the mentholy minty spices, which would be cardamom and dried mint or dried oregano. There's the spicy spices, so cayenne, all the dried peppers. And people have to choose their three spices from at least two categories. And what that does is that forces them to build in contrast and balance. So someone who chooses a lot of cardamom is going to have to balance that with something that is, or match it with something that will balance it. So they may choose something pungent, like cumin, or citrusy, like coriander. And that will mean that the cardamom may be very forward, but it's not going to be overwhelming. So a good teacher is always going to give people some guidelines. We want to set our students up to succeed.
So I predict that that exercise on Monday is going to have a lot of people asking, getting more comfortable and
Yeah,
asking me, okay, what do I need in my cabinet? And I know that's really personal. I have to
right.
ask more questions like what type of cooking do you do? But could you name some basic spices you think almost anyone needs in their cabinet? And then take that a step further and say what would be, say, maybe three sort of like out there
Great.
advanced
I think there
spices to add
are
in.
9 spices that make you able to sort of travel the world in your kitchen. Meaning that with these 9 spices, you can combine them in different ways to really have very different flavor profiles. And those are cumin, coriander, cardamom, smoked paprika, turmeric, cayenne, ground ginger, cinnamon, and allspice. So you get, like I said, they touch in all of the different categories, and combined in different ways, you can make food that reads from uh, that would be appropriate in tacos, that would be appropriate in a curry, that would be appropriate um, in a Southeast Asian dish. Very broadly, but there's a lot of versatility in that nine. Then for more advanced, there are four. So I'm going to take a liberty and not do just three. I really encourage people to explore the
Okay.
world of peppers because we always say salt and pepper together, but salt and pepper should be divorced. Salt has a scientific purpose in food. Pepper is a spice, and so and I mean both dried peppers, like Aleppo pepper and ancho and gochugaru and marash. They really give you an awesome change and can be substituted in really easily anywhere that you use red pepper flakes or cayenne, but also pepper berries. So my favorite black pepper is called comet's tail pepper. It's wonderful. It's floral and beautiful and super elegant. But also people should explore pink peppercorns and Szechuan peppercorns, which technically aren't actually pepper, but we categorize them that way and people should explore them. And you can, again, Szechuan peppercorn's a little bit different because it behaves differently in food, but pink peppercorns taste really different than black pepper, but you can use them in place of it as a finishing spice or a finishing crack like you do black pepper, but you get straight pink sort of blizzard on top of your food that's really beautiful. So peppers are one. Another advanced one would be nigella seeds. They're in the onion family and they look like black sesame seeds, but they have a really smoky and oniony taste. And I use them everywhere. I put them in eggs. I use them as a garnish in salads. Um, they're used a lot in Middle Eastern cooking, and I always have a ton in my pantry. And sumac is the third. It's a source of acidity. It's hard to find for spice blends, so it's tart and has red berry flavors. And it's a great thing if you work really hard to say get the perfect crust on fried fish, right? The batter is crispy and shattering. And you know that the squeeze of lemon juice is actually going to make wherever the lemon falls a little soggy. If you sprinkle sumac on it instead, you get that bright acidity, but you also keep all the texture from your fried fish. So I love sumac. And the last is really advanced blue turmeric. Blue turmeric was a revelation to me. It's not as pungent as yellow turmeric. There's a little bit of a ginger note there. And the first time I used it, all I did was stir some into some slow simmered greens that were really velvety, and it was amazing. So that's my most advanced, but if you can hunt it down, I would really recommend getting some blue turmeric.
I've got to talk about blue turmeric. Is
Yeah,
it blue?
it really is.
Like what shade?
Well, gray blue. Yeah,
Okay. And you're buying it dried
yeah,
and ground or you're
exactly.
buying a
You're buying it
root?
dried and ground. I haven't ever seen fresh blue turmeric root. You can find fresh golden turmeric, which is great, and I highly suggest if you ever find fresh turmeric to cook it up with fresh ginger root, and it's a whole different flavor than the dried versions of both. But I've never seen fresh blue turmeric. Obviously, it exists because that's how you get the dried ground one. I've just never seen it myself.
Okay. Well, you just taught the spice lady some lessons here. That was amazing. Okay. Before we close out, I do want to ask, and we've already talked about the Somalian
Mm-hmm.
chicken soup. So, but think of another one where a dish, think of a spice transformation story that you can tell us, where something was just like, you were just
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
because of the
I mean, I'd say the
spices.
Somali chicken soup is even a little advanced. I mean, it's amazing that everyone loved it, but those are complicated spice blends. Burberry is not a simple spice blend, and that's the paprika based one that becomes a paste. So I love that people liked that, but my simplest spice revelation story of two. One is a simple chili oil drizzled into butternut squash soup. I was so sick of butternut squash soup. You know, you can always get ginger butternut squash soup everywhere. And I just was bored, totally bored. And I made a very mild butternut squash soup base. It was just, I don't even, it was so boring. It like almost doesn't warrant a recipe. You know, onions, celery, roasted squash, water, salt. And what I did instead, I made
You
baby
made baby
food.
food.
I totally made baby food. And then what I did is I took a simple chili called furfa, which is a chocolatey smoked chili pepper, but you could use Aleppo pepper. You could use any single spice blend that you like that has a lot of depth of flavor. Really good cumin seeds would work. Um, and a great paprika if you don't want something spicy. And I bloomed it, so I heated it gently in oil, this Urfa pepper. Um, and I just drizzled it on top of the bowl with a flourish of finishing salt. And it had this real depth of flavor and took baby food to adult food. And why I love using that story is I think a lot of parents who are hesitant to use spices because they're afraid their kids won't like what they make. And if you make your own spice oils at the end, you can serve the base to people who don't like flavor as much flavor. And then the other people at the table who love a lot of flavor can eat the exact same dish but drizzle on the spice blend. And so it's a way to streamline the cooking process for busy families, for busy adults, but not sacrifice at all with flavor.
So that was just
Yeah,
a
there you
picky
go.
eater
Picky
pro
eater pro
tip
tip.
right there.
And then the second
Yep.
way where spices totally transform something is in baking. So there's two examples. So banana bread, if you brown the butter and then bloom cardamom, ground cardamom in the brown butter, it totally transforms banana bread. And I love using that example because it's just one single spice. I'm not talking about a complicated spice blend. I'm not talking about a spice that's particularly hard to find. You brown butter and then you put in the ground cardamom into that hot fat, and it just completely changes run-of-the-mill banana bread into something much more interesting. And then ginger snap cookies, um, where often they'll have almost pumpkin spice blend. I put Chinese five spice in mine once, and I'm a convert. I can't go back. So you buy Chinese five spice, pre-blended at the grocery store. You can make your own. And I just substituted that in exactly one for one for whatever spice blend mix my ginger snaps called for, and or my molasses cookies called for. And it was awesome because there's black pepper and fennel, so there's a little bit of a savory edge, and it makes your sweets so much more interesting when they're not just sweet.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Our minds are blown. First of all, we haven't had breakfast, but our minds are blown
you're
right now. Thank
welcome.
you, Rosie. Okay, so we need to find out how to find you, how to find Milk Street, and so
Okay,
tell us
so
all those
Milk Street
things.
is at 177milkstreet.com is our website. And there's a link to the school there. And that's how you find me because I spend a lot of time at the school. I'm spending a lot of time right now with the gourmet catalog stores and with our online cooking school. And April Dodd is our amazing cooking school manager, and she's spending a lot of time at our hands on classes. And at 177milkstreet.com, you can find out all the information you want about our radio show and our TV show, which are both public media, about becoming a digital subscriber or a print subscriber to our magazine, and all the other amazing things we have going on, and including our store, which has some really cool products. I don't mean to plug another store, but some really cool products for very specialty things. If you decide that Milk Street's a flavor profile you like, then you can buy some fun things there. And where else can you find me? Otherwise, you can find me in my garden in Vermont, where I spend a lot of time on the weekends growing spices because I grow herbs, and herbs become seeds, and a
Oh,
lot of those seeds become spices. And yes,
can I come
anytime. I'm
over?
going up this weekend though to put it to bed because it's in Vermont, so you'll have to wait for 2020.
Yeah. Rosie, thank you
I
so
am
much. This has been a
delighted that you
blast.
asked me to come on the show, and you are most welcome. Thank you for being a Milk Street Cooking School member. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Bye
Rosie.
bye.
You too. Bye bye.